Today, we got a surprise twist in the case of Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender and rich money manager who rubbed elbows with presidents and celebrities. Back in July of last year, Epstein, of course, was arrested and charged with sexually assaulting dozens of underage girls. And a month later, he was found dead in his prison cell in an apparent suicide. Now, almost a year later, Jeffrey Epstein's longtime companion and alleged accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, has been arrested and charged with a variety of crimes, including conspiracy to entice minors to travel and engage in illegal sex acts and perjury. There are numerous women who've spoken on the record throughout the years, decades, about Maxwell recruiting and grooming them and participating in their abuse. Her indictment describes her meeting one victim when she was only 14, taking her to the movies, shopping trips, and roping her into sexualized messages with Jeffrey Epstein. It has been a mystery how Ghislaine Maxwell escaped a prosecution as long as she did. But tonight, she's in federal custody. And for more on what she is accused of doing, I'm joined by Megan Twohey, investigative reporter for The New York Times. After Jeffrey Epstein's arrest last summer, she co-authored a profile of Maxwell titled "The Lady of the House Who Was Long Entangled with Jeffrey Epstein." Megan, what does the charging documents lay out about the case against Maxwell?
Well, this is huge. This spells out criminal charges against Maxwell that mirror some of the allegations we had already seen in civil records. Basically, that in the 1990s, when she was at first Epstein's girlfriend and then just a very close companion of his, lived in his homes, shared the bank accounts, helped run his affairs, that she also participated in helping to lure underage girls into his orbit, where they were sexually abused, sexual abuse that she allegedly participated in. And so there are, in this criminal case against her, there are 3 minor girls who were allegedly victimized by her in the course of the 1990s.
What's so crazy about this is that if you followed this case at all for years, and in fact decades, there are numerous women who, when I don't think there's a single accuser of Jeffrey Epstein who doesn't mention Maxwell. I mean, it is the case that the people on the record in civil suits and in other cases have said from the beginning consistently, story after story after story, that Maxwell was working essentially as his trafficker, that she would scout girls outside private schools who were 14 in New York City. I mean, the why now, how did she get away with this for so long, hangs over all this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And when Epstein was arrested last year, attention pretty quickly shifted to Maxwell. She appeared to be the potential biggest co-conspirator in his predation, in his pattern of predation, preying on these young underage girls. And there had been these allegations in civil lawsuits, and she had been able to, by and large, dodge any accountability. And last year, when he was arrested, I was among the reporters who set off trying to find her. She was not, her lawyers wouldn't answer phone calls. She couldn't be found. She had basically disappeared from New York for several years. And so over the past year, we've all wondered, where has she been? And is anything going to happen to her? And it was interesting. We now realize in the indictment, and the prosecutor is speaking about this today, that she had in effect gone to elaborate means to try to remain in hiding. She had changed her phone number, she had changed her addresses, but they had been, without her knowing it, it sounds like, had been tracking her every move. And that when she finally moved into a mansion in New Hampshire recently, they were able to finally pounce and arrest her and bring her into custody.
My understanding, this is from out of the Southern District of New York, of course, which was until recently headed up by Geoffrey Berman. He was fired by Barr and the president. He sort of refused until his deputy, who was the head of the criminal division, was allowed to take over as acting. So, but just in terms of the timeline, this is a Geoffrey Berman SDNY case, right? I mean, it seems that this case has been in the works for a while. Is it fair to say that?
That's right. This case has clearly been in the works for a while, and there were questions of whether or not it's also worth mentioning that there were federal prosecutors in Florida, who basically let Epstein slip from their grips in 2009, that there had been investigators, both investigators in Florida and FBI officials who had been investigating him for a long time and starting to piece together the puzzle of his predation and other potential co-conspirators in 2009. And the feds in Florida had basically let him slip away, enter into a pretty sweetheart plea deal. And it was really remarkable to watch New York come back, just last year with a really strong case against him. And it's worth noting that that actually followed some pretty incredible reporting that Julie Brown and her colleagues at the Miami Herald did. This was another case where when the kind of government officials had failed to hold this person accountable, some really talented journalists stepped in and helped expose what had happened behind the scenes.
Yeah, in fact, the U.S. attorney who had been overseeing the office that cut that sweetheart deal was the Secretary of Labor, Alex Acosta, under Donald Trump, which is part of the newsworthiness of that story. And he ended up leaving that post, resigning in the midst of that because he had overseen that. The terms of that are almost impossibly gentle, given the sort of scope of predation he was accused of. Of course, then there's Jeffrey Epstein's apprehension. There's his death in Department of Justice custody last year, which has spawned a million conspiracy theories and speculation. And so now, of course, the question of Maxwell's safety, of course, but also, this is now an active case again. I mean, there was this sort of idea when Epstein died that his secrets went with him. We know that he knows lots of powerful people. We know that he had hobnobbed with powerful people. He'd given money to, all sorts of institutions. The same is true of Maxwell, who you can find in the who's who list of pictures. But she now is there, and there's some question about where this might lead, right?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine anybody who might know more of Epstein's secrets and the other people who were involved in his orbit, in his pattern of predation, than Maxwell. I mean, she was, by his account, the person closest to him, his, not former girlfriend turned best friend turned house manager. She had access to the bank accounts. She had access to his personal records. She traveled and partied with his friends. She brought powerful people into his orbit. She, including Prince Andrew, who is another person who appears to be a subject of interest in this investigation. And so it is pretty remarkable to have her now in federal custody and having to answer questions from the federal prosecutors and investigators. I think there's no limit to what she knows.
Yeah, it is a wild turn of events. Megan Twohey, who's done great reporting on this. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Yeah, happy to be here.